A very warm welcome to the video. Today I want to touch on the benefits and negatives, or some of the drawbacks of ice baths, otherwise known as cold water therapy. Now, as a disclaimer, I think there are certainly a lot of people can benefit from ice baths and cold water immersion. However, there are a certain subset of people in the population that certainly should not be using this form of therapy or this practice. So they include people with cardiovascular conditions, some types of neuronal conditions, many other conditions that I'm not going to go into, but just be aware that whether or not ice baths are right for you is a decision that you need to make. And it's probably best just to consult a healthcare professional before you do start anything which can otherwise put stress on the heart and the organs and the body, or the demand on the body. So with that out of the way, I do think that ice baths can be a very positive tool for a lot of people. Now, when we think about Ironman performance, or when we think about any kinds of endurance, realize that what we are doing is quite stressful, both mentally, it's fatiguing, it's demanding, and also physically, of course. A lot of inflammation, a lot of muscle breakdown, a lot of soreness. And that's where I think the first benefit of the ice bath comes into play, which is exercise recovery. Now, there are a few studies on cold water immersion or cryotherapy that look at people who get into ice baths after exercise for a certain amount of time, certain different periods of time, different temperature or of exposure. And essentially what they measure is the subjective benefits of recovery, how fresh the person feels straight away after, but then also in the days following. And they also look at a few key uh, biometrics, which we can look at, which are things like measures of inflammation or muscle breakdown, creatine kinase, C-reactive protein, blood lactate, and a few other things. Some studies have found benefits directly to those biological markers of inflammation and recovery. Others have had mixed results, but what most studies find is that the subjective or the mental feeling of being recovered really is quite significant. And I think that if anything, that's quite important. Obviously, from a scientific perspective, from a physiological perspective, yes, there are benefits that are noted. The literature on all of this stuff, remember, is mixed, because why? They use different control groups, or they use different population groups, I should say. They use different protocols for the actual immersion in the cold water with respect to temperature, with respect to time, etc. So you've got to take a lot of it with a grain of salt. And a lot of these benefits as well, are they going to turn you into a better athlete? Yes, potentially. But is it going to be a huge needle mover in terms of actual physical recovery and your ability to perform from a physiological level? Maybe, maybe not. What's really going to be important is that last one we've got on the list there, and that's discipline. But this is really a formulation or an outcome of all of these things combined, the mental discipline to do it, because ice baths are something that you're probably not going to want to do. It's one of those methods where, we can look at supplements, we can look at different training protocols, we can look at sleep hygiene and think about recovery and overall exercise performance. At the end of the day, all of these things are things which aren't necessarily that physically demanding or stressful to do. Taking a supplement really doesn't take that much energy, but getting in an ice bath, you might be very excited to set up whether it's an old bathtub that you fill up, whether it's an actual ice bath unit that you can purchase, and depending on how extravagant you want to go with it, you may be very excited to get the ice bath in your house or in your garage or in your backyard. But at the end of the day, it's going to not be something that you're going to necessarily look forward to doing just before you jump in. You might look forward to the benefits you experience after, and those compound, of course, because the more you do something, the easier it gets. And when you realize the benefits that it has, it'll be more likely that you'll want to do something. But directly before or immediately before you get in the water, it's not going to be something you're going to want to necessarily do when you could be otherwise just being comfortable, because it kind of does suck. But that's where the benefits also come from. So exercise recovery, yes, a bit of a benefit, I would say. Mental clarity and energy, this is a big one. When we get in the ice water or the cold water, or we're exposed to cold temperatures, but particularly water, because that's where the actual cooling effect on the body is greater than if you just step outside into a cold temperature, etc. what happens is that we have a fight or flight response or a stress response. And the difference in a life stressor versus a stressor in which you are choosing to undergo that stress is quite significant, because obviously from a physiological perspective, we're going to have an increase of cortisol, a little bump, but the net outcome and the way you feel mentally will be quite different. And exposing yourself to chosen stress like the ice bath can actually help you to cope with other stresses in your life and in your, whether it's your training even. So obviously that's a bit of a different discussion. But what happens when we get in the ice bath? We have norepinephrine and dopamine skyrocket. So, they can increase. Obviously, studies have looked at this. How many percentage fold increase they actually increase it's difficult to measure, because you can look at urinary output of these things, but these are in the brain. So it's very difficult to do an actual test to measure how much of an impact it has. But what you can subjectively experience, not objectively, but subjectively experience, is the benefits in your own mental capacity and focus and clarity after these ice bath sessions. So norepinephrine, very important for focus. Dopamine, also very important for focus. Why do people with ADHD take stimulant-based medications that increase dopamine and norepinephrine? Was to help them focus. So if you are someone who does a lot of study, has a physically demanding job, or just needs a little boost in or get up and go for your training, obviously this can be very important. So mental clarity and energy, these neurotransmitters, similar effects, if not better, than having a cup of coffee or some of the other legal stimulant-based medications that you could take. The next thing is an antidepressant effect. Now, studies have looked at this, and again, because of different protocols, mixed results. However, what has been overwhelming, or I guess one of the really promising things to come out of some of these studies, is that when they compared the antidepressant effect of daily cold showers, or sorry, not cold showers, you can do a cold shower, daily cold water immersion in ice bath, which is a little bit better than having just a cold shower, but there's still some benefits there. When they compared that to an SSRI, they found similar, if not sometimes greater results in terms of absolute depression, not necessarily anxiety, but absolute depression. So that's very interesting. Now, is that going to be reproducible? Is that going to apply to you? Who knows? You've got to try it yourself. Under guidance, of course, but very interesting, because we know that particularly dopamine, if you're low in dopamine, you're going to have very low motivation. Having low motivation isn't going to be good for your overall mood and outlook on life. But norepinephrine in particular, this is one of the compounds, or one of the neurotransmitters which is focused on in the depressant or antidepressant medications, such as the SNRIs, so the selective serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, which essentially work to increase the amount of norepinephrine and serotonin, but particularly norepinephrine in the synapses in the brain. Well, if you can do this naturally, well, you're going to have a natural antidepressant effect, so quite significant there. The other is the immune system. I think this comes from a lot of, there's the physiological response in that it can increase your white blood cell count to an extent, particularly acutely. But I think long-term, particularly with the immune system, is that any stressor that we put on the body allows it to adapt. And if you can put that safe, chosen stressor or stimulate the body to undergo adaptation naturally through like cold water therapy or whatnot, then the immune system will adapt too. So you'll be a little bit more resistant, right? But there are physiological, measurable parameters that we can look at here, particularly white blood cell counts and a few other things. But overall, people do report anecdotally, it is important to say that when they do start the cold water immersion and they do it for a period of time, they look back over the last 12 months of doing it and they think, hey, I've gotten a lot sicker. I've gotten a lot less sicker, or sicken. I've got sick less, if I can spit it out. I've got sick less than I otherwise maybe would have, if I look back the last 5 years. So that's important to note. And what do we want a strong immune system for? Well, general life, but also for training. If you're getting sick all the time, you can't go and train. So big benefit there, of course. But the last one that we've got there is discipline. I think that if you can do ice baths and do them religiously, you're going to notice a lot of benefits to your life that aren't necessarily immediately, or I guess technically measurable in a scientific analysis. We're all about the science. Where's the science with respect to, the data, everything? But subjective experience is important as well. And I think that when we know that when we choose to do something that is difficult, the brain centers that regulate our resilience get bigger. And that sounds crazy, but it is proven. I can't remember the exact centers in particular, but obviously you can do that own research. But in essence, when we choose to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but we know that they are good for us, for example, doing some hard work, for example, doing a hard training session that we're not looking forward to doing, but we do it anyway, that resilience, that tolerance for stress improves. So that's where I think implementing ice baths or cold water therapy in your daily routine can be quite more beneficial as opposed to something else that otherwise can help recovery. So, for example, doing meditation or putting on the boots, the recovery boots, and all these kinds of things, which are generally nice to do at the time. Cold water therapy isn't nice to do at the time, and so it gives you that little kick in the butt, so to speak, once you get out, to then, I guess, makes it easier or puts you in a better mindset to then go about your day and go about things that would otherwise be more difficult if you hadn't already had that subjectively difficult experience. It's hard to put into absolute terms, but trust me, if you do it every morning, you know what I'm talking about. So that's overall ice baths. Do I think they're worth it? If you're purely looking to become a better athlete and that's all you want it for, I don't think that the actual science and whether it will make you a better athlete, I don't think that exists. It can improve recovery, which as a proxy or in turn will make you a better athlete. If you can recover better, you can train a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, I think it's more the mindset, the mental aspect, the mental sensation of recovery that is going to improve your athletic performance, your endurance. And generally, and this is where I don't want to, I can't really stress this enough, just your overall outlook in life in general, because having that in your routine is something that is going to add a lot of benefit for very little time. And it's also not going to be fun to do, but the benefits that you'll experience thereafter, I think, will be worth it. Obviously, with any of this, guys, we'll wrap it up there, but consult a healthcare professional before you do get into any thing which does put a stress on the body. For example, ice baths. Also consult, if you want to look into the benefits of sauna and hot water, heat therapy, I should say. Consult a healthcare professional as well, because they're with cardiovascular conditions and other conditions, probably shouldn't be doing some of this stuff or should be doing it in a guided scenario. So we'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think. Put in the comments if you have any experience with cold water immersion and what your key takeaways and benefits were. And hope everyone's keeping well into the new year. Hope everyone's training hard, staying safe, and I'll see everyone in the next video. Thank you.